Well, good morning, everybody. If you're new to New Life, we want to welcome you this morning and just let you know that all of our sermons are on the YouVersion Bible app, if that's a Bible app that you use. If you turn that Bible app on or open it up and go to events, then you will find this service in those events, and you can follow along the sermon with all the scriptures and all the points if you'd like to do that, if that's easier for you to learn. So this morning, question, what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about? I'm sure there are some things that you're thinking about. In fact, for some of us, our minds or our thinking is what woke us up. For others, a little bit of coffee was needed to kickstart that. But now that we're awake, thinking has filled our heads, and there's always lots to think about. So I don't want to make it worse, and I certainly don't want to create any more boundaries or challenges to you being able to pay attention to what we need to talk about this morning. But let me ask you this question. What aren't you thinking about? What haven't you been thinking about? Because I guarantee you that list is a whole lot longer. See, when we woke up this morning, we didn't think about whether or not that house we fell asleep in was going to be there when we opened our eyes. When we stood up, we didn't think about, that floor beneath our feet, falling through that floor wasn't going to be secure enough for us. When we turned the lights on, we didn't think about the wiring all going through the house and whether or not that little flick of a switch was going to cause our house to burn down. When you were driving here to church this morning, you probably didn't think about, all your tires on your vehicle kind of instantaneously just kind of flying off and causing this major accident. You didn't think about those things. And you didn't think about those things because you didn't have to think about those things. And you didn't have to think about those things because someone did their job. The builders did their job. The carpenters, the electricians, the mechanics. The list goes on and on and on. And so the only reason that you would ever think about those things is if someone hadn't done their job. And then all of a sudden, that one thing that you've never really thought too much about would be the one thing that you probably can't stop thinking about, all because one person hadn't paid attention to their job. They didn't do their role. A role that was mostly out of sight until it wasn't. What it was incredibly important. The same is true when we think about the spiritual gifts in the church. We often don't think about some of them when they're being done. But then when something goes missing, when some of them aren't being done, then all of a sudden we start thinking about it. And so we've been thinking about spiritual gifts in the last little while, mostly because of the disconnect that we faced. But now that we've come together, we're thinking about some of these things that need to be done, and we don't often think about them when they are. But then they're not. So what's a spiritual gift? Now, we've been in a series called God the Spirit. And so for the last little while, the last few weeks, we've been talking about the spiritual gifts. A very important part of our faith. And so a spiritual gift is basically this. This was our first definition of a spiritual gift. A spiritual gift is a tool or an ability given and empowered by the Holy Spirit when we come to faith for the sake of the faith of others. And last week we took that lengthy definition and we kind of summed it up like this. We've been fit with a spiritual gift to fix one another's faith. It's as simple as that. Okay, we've been fit with a spiritual gift. God has entrusted you with a gift to exercise that gift. And you have those gifts so that we can fix one another's faith. That is to establish our faith more firmly through the encouragement that everyone using their gifts brings to the body. And when we think about the spiritual gifts, there are some gifts that we think about more than the others. And we think about them more simply because we're more aware of them. And we're more aware of them because we hear about them more. And the ones that we are more aware of, that we hear about more, are the ones that are probably actually heard. And these are called the speaking gifts. I refer to them as the gifts of words. In 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 11, we read these two categories of gifts. And the first one is these speaking gifts. When Peter says, if anyone speaks, they should do so as the one who speaks the very words of God. Referring to these gifts of words, these speaking gifts. And so last week, we went through these gifts of words. And we compared each one of those to a tool that sometimes we grasp in our hands to help us grasp really what this gift does and accomplishes in the church. And when it comes to the gifts of words, they all have to do with the truth of God's word. And so let me just quickly summarize these speaking gifts for you once again. The gift of prophecy was the hammer, and the hammer proclaims God's truth. And then there is the gift of knowledge, and that was the magnifying glass. And the magnifying glass explains or clarifies God's truth so we can understand it a little bit better. It shows us what we need to see. And then there is the gift of wisdom. And the gift of wisdom was the marker flags because it applies God's truth. It shows us where to go or where to stay away from. And then we had the teaching gift, and that was the flashlight because it explains God's truth, kind of step by step, so you can work your way through it and have more explanation, more understanding. And then finally, the gift of encouragement. And the gift of encouragement was the trowel, because that stimulates our faith. It helps us stand firm in our faith. Now, there is something that I have not stopped thinking about this week, because I missed one of the speaking gifts last week. I missed the gift, and I can't believe I did it. I must need a vacation. It does come tomorrow. The gift of evangelism. In Ephesians chapter 4, there's this evangelism gift. And the evangelism gift is the tuning fork, because it puts us in tune with God as people announce God's truth. And so we have these 6 speaking gifts, these gifts of words. But then there's other gifts that aren't literally heard, like me this morning. And so we might not hear much about them, and so maybe not be quite as aware of them, and so not think about them as much. That is, until they're not being done. And these are called the gifts of works. In 1 Peter 4:11, it's referred to as the serving gifts. 1 Peter 4:11, if anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength that God provides. And that's referring to these gifts of works. Now, last week, maybe even right now, as I kind of reminded you very quickly of the gifts of words, you might have been thinking through some of the things I was saying, and you might have realized, I'm not any of those ones. I don't have any of these gifts of words, and so that's okay. In fact, that's really, really good to know, because there are other gifts. And if God hasn't fit you with a speaking gift, God has fit you with a serving gift. These gifts of works. And so as we go through these gifts of works this morning, I trust that one of these will fit your hand, that you will understand, okay, this is the gift that God gave me. He didn't give me the hammer or the flashlight or any of those things, but maybe this morning you'll realize, but there's a gift that I know God has given me. He's fit me perfectly with. And as we go through these gifts of works this morning, one of these will fit, if one of the ones last week did not. Let's go through the gifts of works. There are 7. And again, our prayer as we talk through these things is that we won't just, okay, yeah, I understand what that means, but that you would know whether you have this gift, whether one of these is your fit. Romans chapter 12. We're going to jump back and forth between Romans 12 and 1 Corinthians 12 this morning. In Romans chapter 12, verse 8, we read of one gift of works, and it's the gift of leadership. The gift of leadership. In Romans 12, 8, it says, if it's to encourage, then encourage. Okay, we did that one. If it's giving, then give. We'll get to that. If it's to lead, do it diligently. And so there's this gift of leadership, and what is that? Well, the gift of leadership is simply this. It's the ability to know where Christ is pointing and then guiding people there. That's biblical leadership. It is that simple. Leadership in the church is not about, okay, banking on all of our best ideas. It isn't about ranking a brainstorming session into some things that, we prefer that, or we like that, well, we're not too sure we like that one. Okay, that is not biblical leadership. Biblical leadership is looking into God's word, knowing what it is that God has called the church to be, what God has called the church to do, seeing what that looks like, and then painting a picture for everybody that is casting a vision, and then influencing and mobilizing people together to achieve those goals. And it says that if you're to do this, when you do lead, you do it diligently. And that just means that you do it speedily, like you don't waste time, like it's now. You do it with this zeal. And so that's why sometimes leaders can bug us a little bit, because everything seems so desperate. Like, we've got to do it, like now. And leadership in the church isn't just, for the elders and deacons. I mean, we need leaders all through our church, and we do have leaders all through our church. From birth all the way up, we have people who lead our various ministries, who know, where Christ is pointing, and then guiding these little ones, or guiding the teenagers, or guiding the young adults, guiding us towards these things. And so that's the gift of leadership. And the tool that I think best will help us grasp what leadership is a compass. Because you put a compass in your hand, you know where true north is, and you say, okay, that's where we're going. That's where we're heading. And so maybe in your life, you're a leader. God has given you the spiritual gift of leadership because you hold the compass. And you know what it is God's calling us to do, and then you influence and mobilize people to go, to get there. Very closely tied to the gift of leadership is one that we find in 1 Corinthians 12:28, and is called the gift of administration. In fact, so closely tied are these two gifts that some people don't even separate them. They'll see them as one and the same gift. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 28. Do all have the gifts of healing? Do all speak in tongues? Do all interpret? I'm at verse 30. Verse 28. And God has placed in the church, first of all, apostles, then prophets, teachers, then miracles, healings, of helping, of guidance. Okay, that word can be translated of governance or of administration. And so what is this gift? Well, this is simply the ability to organize people and maintain direction to get where you're going, to get to the destination. This word of guidance or of administration is this little Greek word called, that's pronounced kubernesis. And it literally means to pilot a ship. So you pilot the ship. And so how this is different than leadership is the leaders are like, okay, everybody get on board. Okay, let's go. We got to get going here. Everybody get on board. This is where we're going. But then it's the administrators who organize people, who ensure all the systems are working, that there's maybe even safety measures in place, no one falls overboard, that there's an itinerary being followed. And so we have the leaders that kind of influence and mobilize, and then we have the administrators who organize and who maintain this direction. I think the best tool that would help us grasp the gifts of administration is a map. Because we have the leaders, who are showing where to go, but then we have the administrators, and they tend to like their paper. That there's a plan. Here we are. Here's where we're doing. Here's what we need to look out for. And so they can very clearly see the plan and make sure that we stick to it. And so maybe in your life, you hold the map because you are an administrator. God has given you the gifts of organizing people and making sure we stick to the plan and getting to stick to our direction. Third gift of works is the gift of service or the gift of helps. First Corinthians 12:28. One of the gifts in there, it just simply says, is helping. You help. In Romans chapter 12, we see the same gift. And in verse 7, it says, if it's serving, then serve. So that's the same gift. Now, there is a difference in the Greek words, but it pretty much, both of these things really mean this. If you have the gift of helps or service, you have the ability to take a load off of somebody and place it on yourself. That's really the gift of serving or of helps. You take a load off of somebody else and you put it on yourself. Because both of these gifts have to do with supporting those that are around you. Okay, you support them. When we look at the word service in the New Testament, that's actually the word deacon. And when we read in Acts chapter 6, when the deacons came into existence, that office, they were put in place because they needed to support the elders. And so in Acts chapter 6, verse 1 to 3, the elders are basically saying, look, we're doing all this stuff, and we can't even stick to the things that we know we need to do. We need support. And so the deacons came along to support the elders in what they were doing. But how you support someone in a church, the list of things that you can do, ways that looks, is endless. Of the ways that you can come along someone and just support them. In Romans chapter 16, verse 3 to 9, Paul names a whole list of people that have supported him. And he's thanking them for their support. In Philippians chapter 2, he highlights one man named Epaphroditus. And he says, he was one that helped me. He was a support. And yet when we go through all those names, how those people specifically supported Paul is somewhat unknown. All we know is that they did. And however Paul needed support, they would come and do that. And they were happy to do it, even behind the scenes. And so the tool that I think best describes someone who has the gift of service or helps, actually it takes two hands, is a wheelbarrow. Because people who have the gift of helps are like, hey, where can I take a load off you? Right? And so they come with their wheelbarrow and they're like, oh, you need help here? Let me take this. And they take it and they're off with it and they deal with that and you don't even have to worry about that anymore. See, these people just have that ability to come alongside and just like scoop up some things and take it off your back. And so maybe for you, the gift that fits is the wheelbarrow. That's what you do in the church. You are that support structure for others. You just help wherever you can, taking a load off of people, being the support. All right, gift number 4, and the gift of works, is the gift of giving. Romans chapter 12, verse 8. If it's to encourage, and encourage. If it's giving, then give generously. So what is the gift of giving? The gift of giving is a desire and action to go above and beyond in the meeting of needs. It's a desire and action, follow through, to go above and beyond in the meeting of needs. Now, you are told to give. We don't get out of that one. God commands all of us to give. And we are to do that. We're to do that cheerfully. You know, when we love Christ for what he's done, one of the expressions of that is just to help the mission here, to give. And so we're to do that. And yet there's this gift of giving. And when we look in the language, again, the language is very important when we look at these gifts. When we look at that Greek word give, it's the word didomi. But when we look at the gift of giving, there's a little Greek word they add to that, and it's the word meta. And it's where we get our English word mega or super. And so, yes, we are all to give. And yet those that have the spiritual gift, they're like super givers. They're like the mega givers. They're just able to meet these needs. And it says how to do it. It says to do it generously. Again, that word generously simply means with simplicity, which means all you're motivated by is the need. And so those that have this gift of giving see a need, and they're just motivated to fill that need. And they do it well. And it's not about the size of their bank account. It's not about the size of their ego or needing all the attention. It's none of those things. They see a hole, and they're simply motivated to fill that hole. They're going to do it. That's what they do. And so the tool that I think best resembles a giver. Now, I was thinking maybe I should have saved the wheelbarrow for the givers, as we could use a few more wheelbarrows like most churches. But I think the best tool that represents the givers is a shovel. Because they see a hole and they're going to fill it. As simple as that. There's a need there, I'm going to fill that need. There's a need there, I can do that. I'm going to fill that need. And so they're walking around with their shovels looking for needs, motivated simply by the need. Maybe you're a giver. Maybe God has given you a shovel in the church because you're one that gives generously. There's another gift of works in Romans 12, verse 8, and it's the gift of mercy. If it's to show mercy, do it cheerfully. So what's the gift of mercy? The gift of mercy is very simply being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. It's really as simple as that. You place yourself in somebody else's shoes. You feel what they're going through and you want to be there for them. Now, when we think about mercy, we often talk about grace. There's this tension between grace and mercy. And so what's the difference between grace and mercy? Well, when we think of grace is mostly related to the guilt of sin. And so when we show grace to someone, we're basically helping them deal with that guilt. But mercy is different. Mercy is related to the mess that sin causes. And so if we're merciful, we're actually helping them with the misery of their sin. You see someone in a situation that is maybe a crushing situation, a painful situation, and you want to eliminate their misery and show them mercy. You place yourself in their shoes. In the Old Testament, mercy is often connected to the fatherless and the widows. Okay, they're in a situation where you're going to come and you're going to help them eliminate a little bit of that difficulty. In the New Testament, probably the best example of the gift of mercy is the story of the Good Samaritan. Because there's someone in a horrific situation and everyone's walking by, but there's one who showed mercy. He was able to place himself in this person's shoes and then just do what was necessary to eliminate this person's misery. And so I think the tool that best resembles misery is very simply a shoehorn. I'm going to put myself in this person's shoes. And you know what? It might not fit that great, but I'm going to get my shoehorn. I'm going to force it on my foot to make sure I know what this person is going through, to be able to help them the best way that I can. I will be merciful to them. So perhaps that's the gift that God has given you. He has given you a shoehorn because you just see people in these situations in life and it breaks your heart to the point where you can't walk away. You have to do something about this. And so you step in very practically to their shoes and you do those things for this person. So maybe the shoehorn is what fits. The sixth gift is the gift of faith. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. In this list of gifts in 1 Corinthians 12, we see to another there's a gift of faith by the same Spirit. What's the gift of faith? I think the gift of faith is best explained as this. It's very simply the ability to believe God for what seems to be impossible. It's the ability to believe God for what seems impossible. It is quite simply trusting God for what He promised. And this is what He promises when it comes to faith. In Matthew chapter 17, verse 20, Jesus said, if you have faith, even the size of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move, and it will. Do you know people who have the gift of faith? Because they're pretty easy to pick out. Those that have the gift of faith have this boldness about them. It's like the sure confidence. God's going to do this. God's going to do it. We don't have to worry about it. God's got this. God's got this. And so there's this boldness in people who have this gift of faith. And we see that boldness in Hebrews chapter 11, what is sometimes called the wall of faith, where there's named all these people and their stories and their faith. And what we see in all of these stories is this incredible boldness. They just trust God for his promises. Nothing's going to sway them from that. In Hebrews 11, verse 32, it says, "And what more shall I say? I do not even have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised." Have you benefited from someone with the gift of faith? I can guarantee you have. Look where you are this morning. I mean, the reason that we are even here is because years ago, long before my time, someone had the faith to believe God's going to do this. And so God provided land, and then God provided a structure, and then now God has provided a building, because we've had people in our church with the gift of faith saying, God's going to do this. And it doesn't matter what kind of boundaries or what barriers or challenges we see, because God is going to accomplish this for us. And so we do benefit from faith. And I think the tool that best helps us grasp faith is quite simply a stake that you hammer into the ground. This is where I'm going to stand, immovable. This ain't going anywhere. And so people who have this gift of faith have the ability to just kind of hammer the stake in the ground. Here we are. We're not going anywhere. And so maybe God has given you the gift of faith. You hold the stakes because you just trust God for his promises, and you, in your boldness and confidence in him, move others with you. One more gift of works, and it's called the gift of discernment, or the gift of distinguishing spirits. First Corinthians chapter 12, verse 10. To another miraculous powers, to another prophecy, to another distinguishing between spirits. Now, we might have questions about this one. It does sound a little maybe strange. So how do we define this? Well, those that have the gift of discernment or the distinguishing of spirits have the ability to evaluate whether something is from God or not from God. Very simply, that's what it is. They can distinguish what is from God and what's not from God. Really, what they do is they can show us what the counterfeits are. They can detect a counterfeit. And so look at Acts chapter 16. Verse 16. This is probably the best example in the New Testament of this gift if we don't really understand it. In Acts chapter 16, verse 16, it says, "Once when we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a female slave who had a spirit by which she predicted the future. She earned a great deal of money from her owners by fortune telling. She followed Paul and the rest of us, shouting, 'These men are servants of the Most High God, who are telling you the way to be saved.'" Now, that sounds like a good message, doesn't it? Like, that sounds like the truth. She kept this up for many days. Finally, Paul became so annoyed that he turned around and said to the spirit, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her." At that moment, the spirit left her. See, Paul, even though she was saying things and, barking things out that sounded right, knew something was not right about her. There was something off. There was There was another plan that she had. See, Paul knew that something is just off about this lady. This is not from God. And so those that have this gift of discernment or distinguishing spirits, they can detect the counterfeits, the counterfeit motivations in people, the counterfeit teachings, and they can even detect those counterfeit Christians. Now, I know people who have had this gift of discernment, of distinguishing spirits, and they are a true gift to the church. They warn us of things before we maybe even are aware of what's happening. And so I think, again, the tool that might best help us grasp what the gift of discernment is the level. They just place it on a situation and they can see what's off, if something is off, if something's not quite right. They know this is from God, this is not from God. So maybe that's the gift that God has given you. He's handed you a level because He's given you that ability to just, in your heart, know, I don't know about that. Something doesn't seem right about that. Even to name these things. So we have these gifts of works. These very important tools that God might have fit into your hand. But here's the thing with tools. We often don't know we need a certain tool, until we get into a situation and we go looking for it. That happens at your home with maybe even the tools in your toolbox. I've discovered a tool in the last couple of weeks that most of you might not have, but you need this tool. And in fact, when you know about it, you often wonder how you ever existed doing these projects around your home without it. And it's called this, the windbag. Now, you don't assume you already have one. Okay, don't jump to conclusions, because sometimes there's some confusions about gifts. You might assume some things that aren't right. So you might not have a windbag if it doesn't look like that. But this is what a windbag does. If you are just trying to put a door in straight or set a window in place, and you don't have enough hands to make it level and then put all your wedges and stuff in, the windbag is the tool that comes along and pumps it up. It uplifts it to make sure that your hands are free to solidify that, to make sure it's secure. The windbag is what helps us when something is off. And when you have it, you wondered how you ever did it without it. It uplifts something when it's off. So there is something that's been off. See, what's been off is that we haven't been connecting here like we're supposed to. There's a disconnect from the body. Yes, there's been challenges to that. I understand that. But now that we are trying to connect again and build community, what's been off is that some of these gifts are missing now. See, we often don't think about those things until they're not happening, and there's been some things that we realized just aren't happening. And so maybe the windbag has kind of helped us recognize something's just not right. So the encouragement for us this morning is this, as it was last week. When you are in a church You are not at a building. You are a part of a body. And we need to connect to that body. But you also need to do your role in the body to make sure it all works. That's why in 1 Corinthians 12, Paul uses the analogy of the body to help us understand our gifts. See, something's been off, though. See, there's been a level of disconnect, and even as we're getting together again, we've seen that some things are missing. And so we've been thinking about that. Something's been off. And so it's just been timely in the way that God has, always ordains these messages to align and to be communicated. We just simply need to be encouraged again to use our gifts. Some of them have gone missing. And so if you have a speaking gift, and God has put one of those things in your hand, we need you to use that gift. And if God has given you a serving gift, a gift of works, and this morning you realize that, God has put one of those things in my hand, we need you to use your gifts. Because God has given us a gift, and He's not given us this gift to throw in the toolbox and ignore, but to use on a daily basis in the building of His house, in His church. And He does that for the sake of everybody here, and even everybody who's not yet. But something's been off, hasn't it? So God has fit you with a gift to fix things, to establish the faith of those around you through the mutual encouragement that the gifts give the body. So be encouraged today. We recognize that the gifts are missing. We need you. We need you to use your gift. And let's encourage one another by finding our fit and using it. God, today we are thankful for your church. And we are thankful for the way that we've been able to be a church. And we recognize this morning that the church isn't the building, it's the body. And the body is always existing. Even when we can't gather the way that we've maybe assumed we can, the body is still meant to be functioning. And all these gifts are always in place. They are never put in a toolbox just to wait for the next time. The time is always now. See, we always need those hammers that proclaim truth to us, even when it's hard to hear. We always need the encouragers, to stimulate our faith and to keep us moving strong in our faith. We always need those gifts of faith to boldly celebrate your faithfulness and to encourage us to trust your promises. And we always need those gifts of mercy when people are going through miserable situations, because we can step in and we can put ourselves in their shoes and we can help eliminate that. See, we need all these gifts. All of them are so necessary all the time, and we think about them when we miss them. So God, again, encourage us this morning that we have a gift. Remind us what that is. And continue to equip us as we use our gifts together. We don't just have a place to sit in church. We have a part to play. And we pray these things in your name. Amen. Well, thanks for being with us this morning. Yes, a couple of announcements. First of all, we have bread donation from Panera. If you'd like to take some bread home or share it with your neighbors who might need a little bit of encouragement, again, grab some bread from the kitchen. Second thing is the shoe boxes, the Samaritan shoe boxes. We are doing those this year. If you'd like to pack one yourself, there's some on the table out in the foyer. If you'd like to do one online, you can do that. But also, our Iwana Club on Sunday morning is going to be packing boxes in 2 weeks at church. And so another way to help is just to bring some donations for those boxes. And so those kids can pack those boxes that Sunday morning, I think the first Sunday in November, and then we can move those along. So let's go this week. Let's be encouraged, and let's be an encourager by using our gifts. Amen.